For the tail wheel, I'm going to be using this really nice carbon fiber tail wheel. It's going to fit something like so. The plans have you let in a 1/8 inch 3mm piece of ply into the fuselage side, something like that. Now this is one area where I'm actually going to add a little bit of material to the plan. I don't think that 3mm is really going to be enough meat for the screws to grab into, and especially, I mean, there's no shock absorption with this tail wheel unit, and my really bad landings, the screws might not hold. So what I have done, or what I will do, is I've cut out a additional piece of 3mm ply, and I'm just going to double it up, and now that gives me roughly 6mm or 1/4 inch of material for the screws to grab into. I hope that will be enough. So to glue this in, I've already shaped it so it fits really nice. I will use CA to glue this part in, and then I'm going to use the Gorilla Glue for the main part. So to make sure this sits flush, I'm just going to try to put the top piece down. All right. And then we'll hit it with some thin CA. Working a little bit on the tail wheel control. The real airplane has a really long tail wheel post. It comes back to about here, and it's got some sort of, looks like a chain arrangement on both sides coming back from this horn back to the tail wheel. That's not really feasible, so I'm going with this carbon fiber unit. But I am going to try to use springs, sort of similar to the real airplane, coming back from this brass tube to the control horn. You'll see the control horn is angled somewhat, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the rudder control horn, which will go right about here. They're basically the same shape, just 180 out from each other. So I went to a local spring store. It's a great spring store, has just about every spring you could think of, and I got a couple different kinds. Some are really flexible and bending force, and then the tension is pretty stiff. So this would work. You could cut this down into smaller pieces. Then I got a little bit bigger one. This is actually a compression spring, I believe, but it would kind of work in tension as well. It's pretty stiff in tension. They could be cut down as well. A couple of smaller ones. These are really flexible and not very strong in tension, but I got these thinking I might be able to use them for the gear doors on my Lear fan. Have the gear leg come down and bend the wire and then close the gear doors as the oleo retracts. So a couple more springs, pretty good in tension, a little flexible. These weren't really going to fit. I just got them to get them, and maybe I'll use them in a future project. And then ultimately, I think I'm going to use these right here. It's about the right size. It's pretty decent in tension, a little flexible, and that's what you see right here. Now, I've got to work out a way to make them adjustable. My brass bar, or I should say the boss here, I guess, is not quite perpendicular with the tail wheel. It's just a little bit off, which and also my control horn is not exactly perfect either. So I need to find a way to make these springs a little adjustable, so I can kind of move the tail wheel without moving the rudder. So that's what I'm trying to work up now. I'm not sure if my engineering skills are up to the task, but that's what I'm trying to work out now. The rudder control horn has now been very lightly tacked into place, a single drop of CA. I don't want to glue this in until after I have covered the rudder in fabric. I think it'll be too difficult to try to get the fabric around this. So I'll wait until after I've covered it and glue it in. Yes, the steering control horn has been glued in. I think it'll be easier to work around this with the covering. I did put a couple of toothpicks in to help give it some more strength. I'll sand those down a little bit more, but I think I'll leave just a little bit open to kind of give a impression of a couple of bolts. Both of these horns are made from 62 thousandths of an inch G10, and they are the same shape. They're just reversed 180 out from each other. I have the cutouts for the pull cables to exit the fuselage. The servos up front. It's a pretty long run, but I think it'll be okay. I did pre-stretch my cables. I hung them with about 6 pounds of weight for a day, trying to stretch the cables out a little bit. I have had problems before where the cable stretched on me after it was installed. So I tried to mitigate that this time. So basically all I have done is mark and cut the opening. I'm going to get a little bit lucky here in the fact that the cable is going to exit right by the stringer. So I won't need to have some sort of balsa surface here like I did with the elevator servos for gluing down the fabric. I can just glue the fabric to the stringer, make a little slit right along the stringer, have the cable come out, and then on the full size there is a cover on both sides of the fuselage where the cables exit, so that'll do a real nice job of covering this all up. Here's what I have for the tail wheel control, steering control. I have a 2 mm bolt going through the circular end, round end of the spring through the G10. And on this end, I have a 2 mm screw screwing into the brass tube. And it holds the wire really well on this side. On this side over here, I had a little problem with the spring wanting to slide along the wire, so I added a washer, and that seems to hold it pretty well in place. I'm moving the rudder by hand here. It's not hooked to the servo, but it seems to work pretty well. And a view of what it looks like with the model right side up. I wanted to improve the design here a little bit. When you tighten down the nut, you can see how it captures that spring, and the spring has to kind of do a funky bend there as you move the rudder. So I want to put a bushing, a brass bushing here that allows the spring to just rotate about the bushing, and I can tighten down the nut and bolt. So I have a 2.5 mm brass tube, and it fits nicely and the circular end of the spring. And the inside, it's a thin wall tubing, so it will allow the 2mm bolt to slide through pretty easily. So one thing I'm going to have to do here, I want just a very, very small amount of brass tube. I don't need much. I don't want much. I want to be able to put the brass tube just on this side of the G10. So I just want a very small sliver. I'm not sure if I can cut that. If that doesn't work, then I can always cut a larger or longer bushing and drill a bigger hole in the G10 and have the bushing go all the way through the G10. So let's first see if I can cut a small sliver. In order to be able to cut this brass tube and not have that little small sliver be ejected out into the nether reaches of the universe, I'm going to put a piece of 2mm push rod inside the tube. That'll give the brass tube some support, and hopefully it'll capture this little sliver. I have not marked where I want to cut. I'm just going to try to cut a small piece. Something like that. Let's see if we can get this cut. For grins, I mic'd this and it came out to about 40 thousandths of an inch, which is about 128 thousandths of an inch. Just for grins. But first, I'm going to put the bushing on the bolt. Couldn't see what I was doing with my hands in the way, so I'll just show you. I got the bolt, and then the bushing, then the spring, and then a washer on the bottom next to the G10, and then a nut and washer on the bottom. And that seems to do what I want it to do. The spring slides around. But I think I actually need a little bit longer bushing. So for the other side over here, I'm going to cut a little bit longer bushing and see what happens there. I cut this bushing 3/32 of an inch long, and I think it's actually doing a little bit better. I noticed on this side the nut was loosening up, so I don't think I have quite enough bushing on this, but this nut is staying pretty tight, and the spring is still able to rotate. So I think I'm going to go back and recut the other side to 3/32 of an inch as well. The 3/32 bushing works well on this side also. So I'm getting the forward part of these springs to rotate about the bushing, which is nice. Now if I only figure out a way to do the rear springs as well so they don't get all bent up weird, but I'm not quite sure how to do that with what I have available to me. As of the release of this video, I still have not come up with a good way to make the spring, which attaches to the brass bar, movable so it doesn't create that funky bend. If any of you have a good way to do that, please drop me a comment.